Right, the top story that we are tracking tonight. Market regulator SEBI has sought a 6-month extension from the Supreme Court to complete investigations into allegations made by the Hindenburg report against the Adani Group. SEBI said that it has not reached any conclusion yet, but prima facie investigations have identified 12 possibly suspicious transactions that will need to be rigorously investigated. My colleague Ashmit Kumar, who's been tracking this case very closely, joins us on the broadcast. Ashmit, SEBI was supposed to submit the status report to the Supreme Court on May 2nd, but right ahead of the deadline, the market regulator has sought a 6-month extension. For the benefit of our viewers, could you help us understand why this extension has been sought?
Well, before we go into the why, just to give our viewers a brief insight as to the substance of this affidavit. As far as the affidavit itself is concerned, as you were correctly pointing out, SEBI has in fact gone through the evidence available and has identified 12 transactions which in fact are suspicious in nature and need to be probed. And towards that end, SEBI affidavit says that there's a prima facie view to check for possible violations of disclosure norms, possible violations of corporate governance norms, possible violations of minimum public shareholding norms, as well as possible violations of stock price in terms of stock price manipulation. This is, of course, as far as the Hindenburg report is concerned, but not just that. SEBI affidavit also says that to check for the trading action that took place before the Hindenburg report and after the Hindenburg report, there is a prima facie need felt by the market regulator to check for possible violations of FPI norms, possible violations of ODI norms, possible violations of insider trading regulations, as well as to check whether or not there was any violation of short selling norms. So on the back of all of this, what SEBI says is that rigorous investigations are required, that similarly placed investigations, when done in the US, the SEC there can take 50-odd months to complete the investigation. SEBI then says that even in our situation, an investigation of this nature, the wide scope that has been spelled out, the various violations, possible violations that need to be checked, SEBI says even in our situation, it could very easily, in the normal course of investigations, take about 15 months. But we're trying to put our best foot forward. We're trying to complete the investigation. The time that they've sought is 6 months. They've sought a 6-month extension. This, of course, question being raised by the market regulator. The apex court will, of course, have the final say on whether or not they get that extension and whether or not the Supreme Court has to say anything about this affidavit filed by the market regulator.
Right. Ashmit, if you could help us refresh the memories of our viewers, which are the Adani entities on radar? And what about the leadership of the Adani Group companies? What kind of information is the market regulator seeking as far as the allegations are concerned?
Well, it's important to red flag as far as this affidavit is concerned. It importantly points out that there are 7 entities of the Adani Group, which in fact will be looked at, which will be investigated. The 7 listed entities are Adani Enterprises, Adani Power, Adani Transmission, Adani Green Energy, Adani Ports and SEZ, Adani Total Gas, as well as Adani Wilmar. These are the 7 listed entities which SEBI says would need to be investigated in lieu of these suspicious transactions. Not just that, SEBI also says that not just these companies, but also their subsidiaries as well as step-down subsidiaries could also fall on the radar. SEBI further goes on to say that investigations may also require depositions to be given by key management personnel as well as by the auditor. So that's SEBI spelling out the wide scope of investigations that could cover not just the companies, also their subsidiaries, as well as the auditors and also possibly key management personnel.
Right. Ashmit, all eyes are on the market regulator. But any word on the Supreme Court constituted expert panel?
Well, let's not forget that even the Supreme Court expert committee had been granted 2 months' time. So even their deadline is due to run out shortly. May 3rd is when they're expected to give the report, at least as per the earlier Supreme Court order, as per their findings and their oversight into the matter. Now, what's important to point out is that SEBI, as a part of its affidavit, says that they have shared their prima facie views with the expert committee, that there were 2 meetings called between the market regulator and the expert committee. And in these 2 meetings, SEBI had shared voluminous data, extensive data, supporting notes, and had in fact shared its views with this expert committee. What's important is that the expert committee had been granted this 2-month window and had been asked to file its report in a sealed cover before the apex court. Now, that deadline is yet to be reached, but we're only a few days away now. So all eyes now, other than the market regulator, also on the expert committee on whether or not they meet this deadline or whether they seek the extension. And if they do meet the deadline, then what could be the nature of the findings? There's a big question mark because the Supreme Court says that these findings will be in a sealed cover. So the next week will be critical here, not just to understand the market regulator's stance before the top court, but also the expert committee on whether or not they meet that deadline or seek an extension. And finally, of course, the final word will be had by the apex court on what direction it chooses to give to the Adani Hindenburg saga and the various petitioners who have lined up before the top court.
All right. Thank you, Ashmit, for getting us the big headline of the day. Moving on to the other big story that we are tracking. The Enforcement Directorate